But this is episode 2, Magic of Photoshop, and we're going to focus tonight on the mixer brush. Again, we're going to hear it a second time, and I'm okay doing it a third or fourth time. I want to thank Baby Dreams Backdrops for giving us the platform to help educate photographers with the Baby Dreams Education Group. I know I recognize quite a few faces in here. Some I will see in end of this month in San Diego, and I know it's Cheryl and Jody and I think a few others that have worked with me a little bit before, so that's exciting. I just wanted to say, and I love that about the groups. One of the things I do really love about both Baby Dreams, as I mentioned a while ago to the rest of y'all, is I'm kind of on this personal journey to less bickering, less arguing on Facebook. It just doesn't do any good. And really to try to help others and lift each other's up. And I don't know that I really thought that much about it, but I do love that. You look how big the Baby Dreams group is, and everybody wants to help each other in there. I don't see anyone arguing or complaining or providing negative critique on images and stuff, and that's awesome. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to work on the mixer brush, and I'm just going to show you the basics kind of the mixer brush. Is there anyone in here, and you can put it in the chat, I'd love to hear that has never used the mixer brush, or if you are really an expert at the mixer brush, and I'll repeat something that I say with all of my students. So feel free to answer in the chat. I know Lori will watch the chat. Jody will probably watch the chat. I don't teach the right way. There's very few things that I teach that I say, this is the right way to do it, or this is the only way to do it. That's the great thing about Photoshop. There's a million ways to do things. And I really don't even consider myself an advanced user in Photoshop. I would say I'm average, maybe to above average. I don't spend a lot of time learning things in Photoshop that I don't need. And sometimes that hurts me, and sometimes it helps me. Sometimes it causes me to get into a little bit of a rut. And then when I do that, I've got a personal mentor. It's Richard Sturdivant. But there's also a few other photographers that I reach out to and I'll take a lesson from just to learn something new, learn something different. And it was about 3.5 years ago, I recognized a lot of my work was getting a little bit redundant, and it needed to be freshened up and changed. And I went to a class by Kimberly Smith, one of the most talented artists I've ever met. And there's not someone who is better with just a simple pen, a soft round brush and a soft hard brush. She is incredible. I struggle to do things her way, just because I'm not the artist that she is. But the one thing that I did like that she did teach me was a very simple way to use the mixer brush. And that's kind of what I'm going to show you guys tonight. There's many different ways to use it, but I'm basically going to show you how to use it to get a little bit of a painting effect on an image, right? So I'm going to share my screen. And let's see, here we go. All right. And so can everyone see the flower that's on my desk? Yes, they can. So this is an image that, let me move this over here. So this is an image that if I go to the history, let's see, and I open it here. So this is pretty much the way the image was when I entered it in the Dallas Photography competition, then when I entered it in IPC. And I'll be honest, I entered it as kind of a joke, and I'm going to look over here and see if I can find the actual image that was submitted while it looks for the network. But there's flowers are a really good thing to learn to paint on. Let me see here. If I'll just where is it? Oh, there we go. Finals. Okay, I'm going to open that up for you guys real quick. So this is how the image was. This is how I matted and presented the image at International Print Competition. The title of the image is Baby on Board. I hope that makes sense to you. I did have one judge that said, I just don't understand the title. So thank goodness one of the other judges understood that the little bud here was the baby flower. And so you've got daddy flower, mommy flower, and baby flower. I was trying to tell a story with a flower. And I've always done really complicated images that I've entered in IPC, whether it's my priest image that some of you may be familiar with. It's one of my most known images. And then there's an image that's behind me on my desk that you can see that are 60, 70, 80 hours. That just takes so much time. And if there's anything that disappoints me is in print competition and judging, it's that the images, those kind of images, for some reason, don't get rewarded with the amount of effort that goes into it. But on the other hand, I kind of understand that the judges really don't care about the effort that went into it. They just care about the final product. So being a little bit lazy during COVID, I just wasn't motivated. So I said, I need to do something simple that I feel will score well. And flowers are a big trend in the industry right now. So I said, well, let's paint a flower. So I'm going to kind of just show you kind of how I started with it and a little bit of the tools and techniques that I use. And it's really pretty simple. I'll get into dodging and burning just a little bit and some different brushes. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. Lori, you can watch the chat and let me know if there are any questions. So the mixer brush really is pretty simple. It's this brush here, and I've got my palette edited, and I don't know if y'all know how to do that, but if you come down here and you go to edit your, let me see if I can get edit your toolbar. I don't know if you realize this, but you can separate a lot of these items like this. And if you notice on my screen over here, it changed. So now if I put these two together somehow, if I get it back, there we go. Now I have to hit the little button to get them open. But I have these organized kind of in a way over here that I like to use them. So I have my mixer brush separated from my regular brush. A lot of you, when you look at your palette, you may say, I don't even know where the mixer brush is. So if you'll have a little down arrow on your regular brush that you're used to, and there'll be 3 or 4 options there. So on those options, hang on, let me turn off my cell phone. On those options, one of them will be the mixer brush, and it kind of has this little droplet right here. And that's the mixer brush. So you're going to want to select that. And what I wanted to do was just show you real quick when I put this image together and why I felt it needed to be painted was because I wanted to tell a story with it and I wanted the composition correctly. So I actually shot the image, then I tore it apart and I added all the elements individually. Right? So that's kind of where we ended up with. So now I've got it, and it's kind of generic. There is a background. I picked a background, and I am, so some of you probably know this, I'm a little bit colorblind. So I had a background right here that I purchased. That's just a generic oil painting background right there. And I had it at about 79%, and I had a color from the flower that was in there, right? So, but I'm going to turn all of that back on so you can see it. So those are all of the elements of the flower. So what I'm going to do for the sake of this is I'm going to merge all of these just so it takes up less space and it'll work a little bit quicker. So the mixer brush, when I click on the mixer brush, I want to show you a couple of things up here. So you're going to have wet, load, mix, and flow. The only ones, the way I've got my mixer brush set up is the way that Kimberly taught me. And it's the way that that I would say, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that Richard kind of taught me, or the way he uses it the most. He doesn't have any paint loaded into the brush. So if I was to I'm just going to take a blank layer. Let me see, there's a layer I was practicing on this morning. I'm just going to create a blank layer, and I'm just going to put morning so I'll know what that is. That was where I was trying to find out which image I wanted to use. So I've got a blank layer. I'm going to call this my paint layer. And you might even, I'll show you even a little trick that I do too. You may go paint large flower. All right, so maybe we're just going to paint with the large flower on that layer. So when I come up here, I've selected a new layer. I've got all of these other layers off. I've got a dodge and burn layer here. I'll show you about that. I'll just turn that layer off. Everything else I've got turned off. You've got wet, load, mix, and flow. When you have the little screen here, you see it says load brush, clean brush. I don't have any of those checked. I just have this here. If I've got this checked, now you see I can load or clean my brush. Just like if you think about when you're painting, if I had a real paintbrush, load brush, this would be the color that I would load. And loading your brush is like dipping it in the paint. Well, we don't want to do that with the mixer brush on the way I use it. And remember, I'm teaching the simple way to do this. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to click on this. I'm going to click this off. So now this brush is clean. So if I come over to my brushes and I have my brushes set over here, and I'm just going to go to a soft round brush, right? And I'm a soft round, but it's a mixer brush, not a regular brush. So if I take this brush here and I'm going to go up to these sliders. I'm going to go at 100%, 100%. When you're in a brush with no paint on it, remember this symbol here, and it's got nothing here. See if that's on. Now it's got paint in it. If I was to paint on there, you see how it puts, we don't want that, right? Okay, so I can turn that off. Now it's clean. Then I come over here, and if you see, it's not doing anything. It's doing nothing right now, right? Well, why is it not doing anything? Because I'm on a blank layer, and the flow, this is doing nothing. But if I come over now and I click sample all layers, whatever layers are turned on, it's when I make a stroke, now watch. Now see what happens? So you see how it drugged from here, it drugged whatever was there into this part of the image. If I go here, and now you see how it drugged that part of the image into that part of the image, right? Okay, so that's what they did 100%. That shows you basically what the mixer brush is doing. The mixer brush is just pulling and kind of smearing. You might use the word smudge or something along those lines. I can do it with a different type of brush. If I come over here and I'm just going to take one of Richard's brushes. Now you see how I'm smearing. I'm just using a different brush. Now, what's kind of cool is maybe I want to make a background. Well, I can take this here, and remember I'm sampling all layers. If I want to just come over here with this brush, you see every time I click with this brush, I don't know if you can see it, but it's changing its direction. This is one of Richard's brushes. All of these brushes that I use are Richard Sturdivant's brushes. You'd be shocked how many people in the industry use his brushes. Most of the top photographers that I'm really good friends with, we all use Richard's brushes. He's just a genius with making brushes. But you see what I'm doing here? I'm just taking that image. So if I wanted, I could do this here. I'm lifting and tapping. I could just drag, but then see my brush doesn't change. It did a pattern when I lift and tap. Okay, so as you can see right here, I'm moving colors. So maybe it's too bright up here. Well, I can just drag some of these darker colors over into here. And now I'm just kind of creating my own background, right? What it's doing is it is sampling, as I do this, it is sampling what is going on this layer here. But if you look, it's not touched that layer. Everything we've done is on this layer here. So obviously I didn't hit any areas here. So now I'll turn that back on. I'm going to come over here. I've still got sampled all layers. I can turn off shape dynamics. I'm assuming you know what shape dynamics is. If you don't, call Richard. No, I'm just kidding. But for me, really shape dynamics, the biggest thing that shape dynamics does for me is when I'm on a soft round brush, if I have shape dynamics, let me do a different layer. I'm going to take a different layer and put it on here. And I'll just use a regular brush because it's easier. And I have shape dynamics on right here. When I paint, I'm going to use a black brush at 100%. If I kind of go up here, you see how it comes a little bit more to a point. When I have shape dynamics off, see how it doesn't come to a point. So I figured out, stupid me, I was having a lot of trouble during creating my competition images that I was getting some weird blotchiness on the skin, and I couldn't even out my skin tones when I was doing my skin touch up with my painting on an image I was painting. And it's something I've been struggling with. And I went back, I zoomed in and was really looking at what the brush was doing. And that's when I figured out this whole time, the brush I've been using, I had shape dynamics on. So when I was painting and I was doing this little, it would come to a point. And so it would take those colors and it would kind of scrunch them together. And I was having a lot of trouble. So now I have shape dynamics off, right? So there's your little shape dynamics lesson. We hadn't even planned on that. So if I want it to a point, I turn it on where it finishes more in a point and it kind of feathers out. Or if I want it to be smooth, then we'll do it that way. So I'll go back over here. I'll select my mixer brush. And then I'm going to go back to, I don't remember which brush it was. That was that one there. And now I'm just going to go back. I'm on sample all layers. And I'm just going to bring some of these dark colors up into here. Right. And if I wanted to go backwards, I could use that as the background in my flower image, right? I could always duplicate it. I could go to filter, blur, and just maybe put a Gaussian blur on it. And see that right there will kind of soften it up a little bit, and I can reduce the opacity of it, right? If you wanted to throw some other colors in here, and I'll just make up a color if I wanted to come in here and throw in a red, right? I could just paint a little bit of red right there. And now with my regular brush, I can go back to my mixer brush, and now I can blend this color in here if I wanted to add a little bit of color in here. All right, so does that make sense? That's how most of the people that make backgrounds, they're using the mixer brush, they're putting their colors in there, and they're moving them around, okay? So that's how we use the mixer brush if you want to make your own custom oil type of Old Masters background. And you can just come up with all different kinds of brushes. That was just a texture brush that I was using, or I'm sorry, that was an oil brush. Richard's got all kinds of different brushes. I've got a really great one here that I like. Where is it? Right here. This is the Sandra Pierce's brush. I love this brush here. It's one that
me too. Love it.
That's a fantastic brush. I've done clouds with it. It just, as you can see, it just, you see it's moving. That's a great brush for creating backgrounds. Working on skies. It can work kind of as a cloud brush. But I really like, I mean, you know, right there, there's your free background or whatever, right? Okay, so let's get back to doing some painting. So I'm going to delete these layers. Don't need them any longer. And I'm going to create me a new layer. Now I'm going to go to my mixer brush, and we're going to start with this new layer. We've got sample all layers turned on, and we're going to start off really, really simple. I'm just going to go with a soft round brush. All right, so now let's go back to our controls. Sample all layers. I'm painting on a blank layer. Some people will duplicate this layer. They'll duplicate this layer. Hello, computer. And they'll just paint on this here, right? And you can do that. Richard is the one who taught me to do it on a separate layer. And I think there's a lot of benefits for that, for blending it later and things like that. So I like to stay with doing it on a whole new layer. And we're going to call this paint big flower. So now I've got my mixer brush. Now, if you recall, when we were up here, when we had the wet at 100% and the flow at 100%. So if that's the case, and I start to paint, and I paint, the bigger my brush is, the more pixels it's going to move, right? That doesn't look bad, right? But I'm losing a little bit of detail and everything. I'm just going to back up here. So when I'm at, and watch, so let me just show you this here. I'm going to do this, right? And you see what happens. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to take my load to 0 and my mix to 0. There's nothing to load and there's nothing to mix. So it's going to do the same thing, right? It's basically the same thing. I may have made my brush a little bit smaller. It's kind of doing the same thing. It's really not impacting anything. But watch what happens when I bring my wet down. I'm going to go to an extreme. I'm going to take my wet down to 16, and I'm going to take my flow down to 16, somewhere around 16. You see how it's real faint right there? It didn't do that great big heavy stroke that it does. So when you're using the mixer brush, and for me, these two numbers, and this is what Kimberly Smith taught me, and this is how I paint most of the stuff that I paint. So if I undo this, I'm going to zoom in, right? And now you can see. So with this flower, the first thing I want to do is I just want to give it a smooth, creamy, painterly feel. So I'm on a separate layer. I'm going to start off at 23% and 23%. I don't know what's going to happen. And I've got my fingers, my left hand is on the bracket keys. So the left bracket, if you can see, is making my brush smaller. The right is making it bigger. So I'm going to show you a couple of cool tricks. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start painting here. And if you can see there, you see how that edge is smoothing out? And my brush is not real hard. This is a soft brush. So it's kind of blending it into that background as well. So if I want to undo that, let me go to my history brush. There, it's just easier to do this. I'll just turn this off and I'll do another layer, right? And so now if I do it with a hard round brush, same settings and everything. Now I'll just start doing this here. See, it's not as foggy on the outside of the edges of that. It's a little more crisp to me. I don't know if y'all can see that. That's with it. That's covering it up. So when I turn that layer off, you see how that has a smoother edge. So that's your artistic decision. Which way do you go? I'm going to go back to a soft brush. I'm going to just take it down here. And now I'm going to come around here. Now, here's the thing. I'm using a pen. And what you can't see is you can't see my hand. But as my hand gets up here, let me stop sharing for a second. I'm going to show you a really, really cool trick that even the great Corey McDonald didn't know about. So look here. So if you saw the way that flower was, the flower was on an arc kind of like this, and I was painting it this way, right? And when you get to the top of that flower, your hand gets in this awkward position and you can't see what you're doing. And it's hard to make a smooth stroke. All right. So watch what I do now. This is really cool. This may be the one nugget that you get out of here. If I hit R, hang on here. If I hit R on my keyboard and I hold it down, guess what I can do? I can rotate my screen. I can hit the space bar and drag this. And so what I can do now, and Corey McDonald is one of the best that I've seen at doing this.
Can you only do that if you have a Wacom?
I don't believe so. Try it with your screen, Lori. I'm 99% sure you don't need a Wacom. Oh, you don't have Photoshop open.
Oh, yeah.
I'm 99.9% sure that you don't have to have a Wacom. Forever, I thought you did, but somebody try that and let me know. So now I can put my hand back up here, and what I do is I brace my palm against the monitor. I'm editing on a 24-inch touch screen, so I'm not using. Let's see if y'all can make sense. Those of you that have been to my studio, you'll know this. Let me stop sharing so you can see me. So you can't see it, but I'm actually writing on my monitor. So right here, there's the pen, and I come right down, and I am painting on my monitor. I don't use the little pen or the little tablet that is off to the side that's plugged in. I have dual monitors, so I'll have Bridge on one side, and I'll have this 24-inch monitor here. I tried forever to use the little pad that everyone uses. It's $300 to $700, whatever it is. And I could never get used to, even though we do it with our mouse, with my hand over here, but I'm drawing or painting and the effects of it are somewhere else. So if you struggle with trying to use a Wacom, whatever you want to call it, do a test, find a buddy. If you're in Dallas area, come by. I'll let you play on mine for a little while. Try to practice or demo one where you can actually paint on the screen. They have one called, I believe it's called the Wacom One. It's about $400. It's a 13 or a 16 inch. It's pretty small, but it's really good. If I was just starting out or I was more on a budget, that's what I would go with first. Okay, so let me go back to share my screen so you can see me painting. All right. Okay.
You don't have to have a Wacom to rotate it. I just did it just for practice.
And it did rotate?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it would. So now the good thing about this is every now and then it'll get stuck. You see that this stuck's there, so I got to go back over and hit my mixer brush. What I like about it is I can plant my elbow on my desk. I can put my palm on my screen so I can control my brush strokes. All right. So let's look here. So let's just say as I'm painting, what I'm trying to do is I'm just smoothing this flower out so it doesn't look as choppy on the edges. So if you watch here, what I'm doing is I am pulling this part of the image to here. So everybody does it a little bit different. Some people will do these great big long strokes. Some will do these little short. So I lift and tap, and your tablet is pressure sensitive. So if I feel like, hello, Samantha, welcome to the group. So if I feel like I'm not moving enough material and it's taken too long. So if I'm painting, let's just say this here, right? And I feel like that's really, this is a pretty good effect. You can see what it's doing there. But if it's not moving enough, sometimes I'll reduce my flow way down. If you feel like you're having to make way too many strokes, for example, right here, like just doesn't seem like anything's happening, well, then just go up, move your wet up, move your flow up. And the way that I do it, like I said, I'm not telling you the right way. I'm not telling you the wrong way. I'm telling you the way I do it is my wet and my flow are almost always the same. When I'm really working on a big image, and I used to have them on my other computer, I haven't loaded those brushes, but I actually had 4 brushes set up and I created a new folder. I had a brush set up that was a 15 and a 15 on my load and wet, and I saved that brush. And then I did a 30 and a 30, then like a 60 and a 60 and a 75 and a 75 and 100 and 100. Then I didn't have to go up here and keep moving those numbers. I just selected a different brush when I needed to move more pixels. And that's really all we're doing. So let's just hypothetically say, oh, crud, I did that. How do I fix that? There's a couple of ways. I can simply go to the eraser, boom, and I've got my eraser set at 100%, and I can erase this. I'm not touching, it's not affecting the image. This is a non-destructive way of painting. See, I'm not affecting the image, the original image, right? The other way that I could have done that, let me go back to my mixer brush. See, you're moving paint. So really, all I really have to do is I can drag this color over to here, and that helped me smooth out. So like this flower's got this little part that's sticking out here. So if I want to get rid of that, I don't have to go back to the original image and clone it out. I can just come in here and get the shape that I want, right? So right now I'm at 42 and 44. Those numbers don't have to be exact, right? So now I'll just come along here. And if I'm starting to get at a weird angle with my hand, then I'll rotate my screen back over here, hold the space bar to drag it. Then I'll come in along in here. And I'm just trying to get a good smooth edge. I'm adjusting the size of my brush, putting this here. All right, so now I'll show you another little trick that I use a lot. So sometimes when you've got things that overlay each other, this one is so important. I'm going to take my polygon tool and I'm wanting to paint this part of this flower, but I don't want to get into this flower. All right, so I'll just come along here and I'll just follow this. I don't want to get into any of that other flower that's over here. I just want to stay on this flower. Right? So I'm just going to do that. Then I hit enter. Now I can just come in with my mixer brush and I can start working in here. See? And if I do anything here, see how it didn't go over into that other flower? So this helps me blend everything. Right? So as you can see, anything that looks rough, I'm pulling it. So I don't like the way that looks. That's fine. I'll just smooth this over like that. Right? So I'm just making this. For me, a flower is the perfect thing to learn. And let's say, oh, I really don't like that much color brought in there. Okay, let's pull a little bit of it back. What if I go, man, that's just pulling too much too fast? What do? We come up here, we reduce our flow, we reduce our wet. And now what's happened, it's going to pull less. You see how it's taking me more strokes to pull that color up into here? So now I'm just going to keep painting here. And I think you should be able to see that we're starting to get a little bit more of a painted look going on with this flower, right? Right, so I'm going to smooth this out here. If I want to see what I've done, I can always turn my background layer off and I can see where I've painted and where I've not painted. So I missed a little bit spot there. Not a big deal. Okay, so we're just going to smooth this out. And this is where you just get to be, this is where you get to be an artist. And this is one of the best ways to learn to be an artist, right? So now you can see where I had that polygon on there. I must have had it messed up there a little bit with my selection. That's no big deal. So all I have to do is I just have to pull some of this color into here. I'm going to be smoothing this edge out anyway, and I'm going to be smoothing this out, but maybe it's starting to blur too much. Maybe I want that edge a little sharper. So now I'll paint with a harder edge brush, right? And now my arm is starting to get in a weird position. So I'm just going to rotate this around, and now I'm going to come back here. I'm going to paint in this area, this direction, right? And I'm going to come in here this way. That's starting to look pretty good, right? Okay. So I'm going to go back to this flower this one that I was painting on here. And now I'm just going to go back to what we were working on. And now I'll just start pulling this from here and blending it into here. So I'm fine with that color being pulled up in there, right? So if I'm worried about going over into here, I could polygon this. I could do a quick selection. I could come in here and select this, right? So hang on, I need to select it here. Hang on. So I was selecting on the wrong layer. I'm selecting on the original layer. The Alt button will come down here. You can do a selection. If you just want to paint within a selection, right? We're going to kind of come out here a little bit, right? And I'm not going to go in. If I was doing this for a client or a personal project, I would go in and clean that up a little bit. So let's just go here, hit the shift. We'll go here, 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 here. Do that selection. Maybe I want to get rid of some of this selection here. So I'll do this. Right? So as you see, you could make a perfect selection and then you could paint in there not worried about, coloring outside the line, so to speak. Go back to my mixer brush and I'm just going to start painting. So hopefully you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit more. You can see that texture starting to go away, right? So if it's not moving fast enough, and for, oh, look what I did. All right, we're gonna go back here. You see what I did? I was painting on the wrong layer. Shame on me. That's another thing. So let's talk about that for just a second. Let's go to Photoshop. Let's go to preferences, and let's go to, where are we? Performance. If you notice, I've got my history set state at 499. That way, if I realize I've messed up for a whole bunch, I can go back. I don't know what Photoshop's default is, but it's probably something more like 50 or 75. But when you're doing a painting, there's a lot of times where you're painting something and you don't want these big, long, flowy, smeared looks. You're going to want these little, like face, and you're doing this little dabbing. When you do a lesson from Richard, he's showing you something. Richard's like the king of it. The way he paints, if you can hear my screen, he's just doing that all day long. It's just crazy. So every time you do a tap, then you're doing a new history. If we watch the history over here, you can't tell it, but it's just going way, it just keeps adding more and more and more every time I tap. So make sure your history is set, because as you paint, you're going to have a lot more, I don't know what you would call it. You're just going to have a lot more items or a lot more things that you're doing. And if you ever need to undo them and go back, you can do that. All right. So we're just going to paint this a little bit. Yes.
Chris, would you turn that layer on and off real fast so we can just see the difference?
Yeah, sure. Let me back out just a little bit. So we've been working on this one here. So you see the difference? Does that help? That's off and that's on. Can you see? Can y'all see the difference?
Oh, I can definitely see the difference. It's just fun to, I mean, I could see it as you're doing it, but it's fun to see the whole picture turned on and off there.
So then what you do to really enhance it is you come up here and I've got a dodge and burn layer, right? So if now we're getting outside the mixer brush, but if I wanted to come in here and darken a part of this, I've got my mixer brush. I've got just a traditional dodge and burn, and I'm going to bring this, I'm going to use my brush and I'm going to put that at about 12%. And I'm going to come back in and then I'll just see what it does. So maybe I want this part a little bit darker, right? Maybe I want to create some depth in here. So I'm going to come in here where the shadow areas are, and I'm just bringing in some darkness. And here I might want to put shape dynamics on so that it goes to a point when I release my image, so it doesn't stay the same size. So as I lift up and pressure releases, right? So let's just darken this part a little bit. Maybe we want to come in here and darken this part of the flower a little, right? That's all you. This is what will create depth in your image. Dodging and burning is probably the most underrated thing in images. So if you want to create like this has more of a lip, then you would darken this side, because when you darken things, it tends to push them away from you. And now I'm going to go to the bright side. I'm going to make my brush white. And now I'm going to brighten this. Right? And if I want to come in here, if I want to brighten this part here, where a highlight might hit it, you come in here. Maybe I want to hit a little bit of a highlight over here or something. And then you can kind of see, you can see how that just dodging and burning, right? How much that changes. Then here's your painting. So let me paint just a little bit more. Let me go back to my mixer brush. I'm going to take the dodge and burn off. I'm going to get rid of some of you see all that texture that's there, because there's something else I want to show you that's really cool. Right. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll pull up an image and I'll just mess with a little bit of hair. I'm not anywhere near as good as, say, somebody like Richard or Amber Demore or Shannon on doing hair, but I'm a lot better than I used to be. I just don't do it enough. Right. So I've kind of worked on that leaf. If I want to come over here and work on this little part right here, just to show y'all, I'll just smooth this out. Right. You see how that smoothed out that edge? I need to rotate my palette because my hand's getting in an awkward spot, right? Go back to my mixer brush. And I'm just going to keep swinging. You see how this has kind of jagged or whatever? Even though that's the way the flower naturally is, it wouldn't be that in a way in a painting. Okay, so I don't like what it just did there. You see how it moved so much of that that color and everything? I'm going to undo it. It moved it just too much for my liking. So I'm going to go up here and reduce my flow. Now I'll put my flow and my wet down to 12%. Okay, it's still a little bit more than I want. That's fine. I'm going to move it down to 5% or so. There. Now I've got a little bit more control. I'm gonna have to do more brush strokes, right? So now for whatever reason, I'm not liking that. So I'm gonna bring it back up a little bit on the flow and everything. There we go. That's pretty good. And I'm, if you notice, the one thing I am doing is I'm following the shape of the flower with my strokes. I'm not painting this way, right? I'm not painting this way. All of my brush strokes are going in the direction of the flower that it naturally goes, right? You wouldn't want to paint this way, right? That just would not make sense. Okay. And then here's the cool thing. So let's just say, you know, someone's sitting out there and they're going, yeah, that's cool, but that's just too way overdone for me, right? Okay. And this is the way you do it on here. That's just too way overdone. Fine. This is why you do it on this different layer, because you just come over here and take the opacity and you drop it down. So that dropped it to 67%. So now maybe it shows a little bit of that texture underneath it, right? So play with your opacity of that layer for you to dial in how much painting you like, right? So that's at about 65%. Here's about 39%, right? But I'm going to go up to 100%, okay? Right? So let's just hypothetically say we painted this whole flower, because we don't want to be here as long as it would take to paint this flower. When you're not talking and you're just working, you can work through this pretty quick. But so I'll just show you right here. So if I'm painting this here, right, I'm just going to smooth this out a little bit. See, I've got that area there, so I don't want to run into that. I'm going to take my polygon tool. I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to come in here. And I know I was off a little bit right there. That's fine. I'm not going to make it all the way down here. I'm just working on that area there. I don't want to get into that flower. Boom. Now I can take my mixer brush and I can go to town now. See, I can pull into here and I'm not encroaching on that other flower. Pull this the direction of the flower. I'm not encroaching into this one, so I can pull it right up to that edge. That'll help create depth and dimension because you're not blending. These two flowers would be separate from each other, right? See, I might even bring a little bit of darkness of that over into there. Now I'll pull some of it this way, or I'll pull some of that. If it's not doing it enough, okay, let's move these up a little bit. 23, 25%. Now I'm pulling a little bit faster, right? So this is where you just play with it for a little bit, and you'll have a hard edge here, but then you just come back later where those flowers are, and you just lightly blend those little edges right there. You see there's a little hard edge right there. I'm just going to soften that edge a little bit. Okay. Right. So let's pull this down here. Okay. And you see there, I mean, I think that's looking pretty good. That's looking very painterly. I might want this here. So if I was playing with this a little bit, it's like, yeah, I don't like the way that doesn't flow enough. I'm going to take that way up, and maybe I take this here and pull this up here. And now I'll pull that there. Oh, that was way too much. That looked terrible. Okay. We'll pull our wet and flow down. It was way up. I'm going to pull it down to around 18, 20%. And now I'm going to just start working this into here. Start trying to get this to flow this way a little bit more. So I'm just kind of blending these, making this arc a little bit smoother. And what I'm doing is I'm planting my palm on my monitor. And now I'm just rotating the pen around my monitor, or around a kind of an axis point there, right? So now that's starting to look a little smoother. And then when I dodge and burn, I can bring in other areas that I want to bring in. Does that make sense for you guys? That's really all there is to the mixer brush. It's not overly complicated, right? So let's, any questions on that before I show you something else that's pretty cool? Okay, so what I'm going to do now, let's just pretend the whole thing was painted, right? In fact, let me see if I can do it up here. Okay, so let's, you see there's some texture in here. You see these, you see the texture, Jody, can y'all see that? You see this texture and stuff that's in here? It's not all smooth and creamy like this one here is smooth and creamy, right? Yeah. So I'm going to duplicate these two layers. Let's just say I've got it all painted and I'm happy with the way it's painted. Now what I can do is I can come in here with my dodge and burn. And what happens if I take a regular brush and I come over here now and let's just find a texture. I'm going to find me some kind of texture. Let's just try D03. Okay, that's kind of a cool texture. All right, we'll just see what this does. I'm going to go to my darken layer. I'm going to put my brush on black, and I'm going to bring this down to about 5%, and let's just see what happens. Okay, can't see a whole lot. I can see it on my screen starting to come up. I'm going to just bring that up a little bit so you can see what's happening. Now, can you see what it's doing? So as I'm dodging and burning with this, I'm adding texture into that flower, right? I'm doing it by dodging and burning with a texture brush. Okay, does that click for you guys? So I did it on dark. Now what if I want to do it on bright, my bright layer? So now I'll reduce my opacity a little bit. Now I'll come in here, right? Maybe I want to bring it up more just so you can see. Okay, see how now it's bringing in some light texture on top of that dark texture. And you may not like that, but you see what it did, how dramatically it changed that flower. That's just dodging and burning. So I do that a lot with, once you've painted something and it gets too smudgy and too creamy looking or something like that, it's really simple to just come in and add a little texture, right? Sometimes you may have that same thing happen with a skin. You've done skin and the skin gets too much texture. Fine. Duplicate your layer, go to filter, noise, add noise. Come in here and add a little bit of just whatever here. Let's set on 7%. And now what I can do is I can reduce this noise, right? So there's 0. Now I can bring it up to a level that I like. And that's 25%, right? Maybe that doesn't show it good enough for you guys. I'll bring it way up just so you can see. And if I put a mask on it, I could paint the mask. I could paint that noise into the flower or into somebody's face. When you've got something where you've done too much touch up on something and you seem to have lose those pores or what have you, that's a trick right there that you can do to add texture back into, you know, there was a trend a few years ago when somebody would edit an image and it would look like a China doll, you know, plastic. It's because they've removed all of the texture, right? So that's just one way that you can add texture back to an image. Okay, does that make sense for you guys? Does that help? All right, so let's just let's talk about the mixer brush real quick. I don't know that I've got a composite I can pull up, but let me go back here. I'm going to undo this. Let me go back here. Let me go to the history, open that up. Okay, so this is back to where we started with the image, and I've got all these extra components here, right? I've got the daddy flower and everything. So it's separate from the background. So you could call this a composite. Well, one of the biggest things that the people make on compositing is getting the subject to kind of blend with the background. So one of the first things that was taught to me on composites was do that blank layer over all of this here. Now come in with my mixer brush, and I'm going to just use a soft round. Where's one of my soft round brushes? Those are pencils. There's a soft round, right? And I'm going to take my wet and my flow at 20%, and I'm going to sample all layers here, right? I've got sample all layers checked up here. And now I'm just going to come along here on the edge of the flower. Let's just say I don't want to make this a painting, but I do want to make it seem kind of like it fits with the background, that it doesn't look copy and pasted. So I'll just come around the outside edge of that image. And what it's doing is pulling a little bit of color from the background, and it's pulling a little bit of color from the foreground, right? And it's just making it look like it kind of belongs. The two are blended together a little bit. That's a trick that real good compositors will do right before they really start finishing an image. Right? They'll just come in and do that. And I'm doing this really quick just so you kind of get an idea. And then if I turn that off and on, can you see how, I don't know if you can see, but it does look like it to me, how it's helping it connect it to the background a little bit better.
This is my nugget.
Does that help you with, that'll help you a lot with composites. The biggest thing that people mistake, the biggest, in my mind, the number one mistake people make with composites is understanding how to connect someone to the ground. That's the number one mistake with the shadows and stuff. The number two mistake is connecting them to the rest of the image. And so whenever you've got that person in that composite, you've got to blend those edges so that they feel like they they go with the background. And you can do it on a higher level and then back off the opacity of it. Okay. Does that make sense for you guys? Okay. So now let's, any questions on mixer brush? And I didn't want to go into super heavy mixer brush. I showed you how to use a different brush, like an oil painting brush, and how you make your own background. I think I've showed you quite a bit. You'll need to dodge and burn. Maybe, hair is a great one. Let me see if I can find real quick. I'm not going to go into hair. That's a whole week's worth of lessons there, is to learn to paint hair. Let me see if I've got, let me see. I don't want to open that one. Let me see. There was one that I was working with earlier today. Let me see. Where's Chandler's images? I was playing around with one this morning. Is it here? Yeah. So this is one that I've been dabbling with for a while. And I'll just kind of show you where I've been playing with it. This one, it really is challenging my skill set to really make it. I'm not there with it yet. This is a big file because I've been playing around with it for a while. I disconnected my Ethernet, so it's trying to pull it through the Wi-Fi. So that's what's going on off the server. All right, so what you can see here is I really did not like the way the hair lady did her hair. From the front, it looked really good. From the side, it looked terrible. And I just wasn't paying attention when I shot her. I got the shot that I wanted. I posted it on my Facebook page the other day, this same dress and same young lady. Child Couture magazine recognized us with it, but I just didn't like the hair. So I started playing around with some different areas in it. And you know what? I didn't even save it. Oh, I didn't save it. Yeah, it is. Okay, so here's where I'm taking out that flower. I'm taking out everything, and I'm trying to give her a different hairstyle, right? And yeah, it looks too overly painted right now. And that's okay. And I've smeared it outside the backdrop, so that's fine. I can come in here to my eraser tool, and I can remove some of the painterly. So that's where I would have to clone out some of that there. So just for the sake of this argument, I'm going to do this here. So now if I say, well, it just does not look the way I want it to look. So I'm going to go over here to brushes, and I've got these. I started organizing these because Richard's brushes all come in one big group. So I've got some hair brushes here. I'm going to select a regular brush, then go back here to the hair brushes. I moved the hair brushes over. So he's got fine hair. That's not really the one I want. Let me see which brush I want. Yeah, so let's try this brush. Now I'm going to just take a regular brush. This is not a mixer brush because I'm going to do this first. I've started me a new layer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here. I'm going to hit the Alt button, and I'm going to pick, let's just say I'm going to pick this light color here of her hair. And now I'm going to take this brush. I'm going to just start off with it at 50%. And I'm going to come in here with see, that was too much. I don't know that you can see that. That was too much and it was too big. So I'm going to make the brush size smaller, and I'm going to reduce my opacity of my brush a little bit. And now I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to put in some more highlights like this, some strands, I guess you could call it. See where that is so smeary right there? So this is one of those images that I'm working on to try to learn how to do hair better. So I'll come in here with this, right? And then maybe I'll come in and pick a different color here. I'll put in some of this color here. And so I'll just start coming in and playing with some of the different colors, and maybe I'll try a different brush. Here's another hair brush. So let's just see what that does. All right. And now let's take a different color here. Let's take that color and put it over here on the top. And if it's not showing enough, I'll turn the opacity up. All right. So you can see it's adding some hairs. And then what I would do is I would come in, and now I would use the mixer brush, right? And this is, like I said, this is just, I'm just playing. I'm just trying to learn. And Richard gets on me a lot about not doing this enough. And I don't do this enough. where I'm just trying to figure out the brushes. I'm trying to learn the brushes. What's this brush do? Okay, well, let's see. Oh, well, let me pick a different color. Okay, well, I'm gonna come in here and throw in some different colors. So this is where I'm learning how to use the brushes. Let's try this wide hair. What does it do? All right. And now when I zoom, let me just see when I zoom out, it's at least starting to get a little bit more texture in the hair here as compared to here, right? So I feel like I'm kind of on the right track. Now, if I wanted to, I could paint that hair. I could do a new layer. I could take my mixer brush, just like I told y'all, with a soft round, and I could come in here and I've got sample all layers selected. And I'm going to turn the wet and the load way down on this. And now I can just come in here and you see how I'm just lightly smearing this out. Okay, let me try to zoom in a little bit more so you can see, right? So we've got these hair strands, right? So now I'm just trying to smooth them out a little bit. Right? And what happens if I go too far on this? That's okay. I'm not worried about it. I've gotten to a point where I can fill in some hair every now and then, and it looks pretty good. So there's a difference, right? So let's just get a little bit up in here. And now if I want, you know, that's 100%, but now if I want, I can back that layer down. So I took about 10% off that layer so I can still see some of the strands. So anyway, that's me practicing just on some hair, right? I'm not worried about what's going on out here right now. I'm just learning. I'm just trying to do something different, right? One of the things that I'll tell you is, you see how I have this labeled hair? One of the things I've learned that works for me. So let's just say I want to work on her dress. I'm going to create a new layer and I'm going to call this dress. Richard, and I don't know that Richard does it. He does it some with definitely his components, but I've started painting different areas. So I'll paint skin with one layer, then I'll paint the dress with a different layer, because I may want to adjust the opacity or the effectiveness of the paint on that layer different than I do the hair, right? So I'm going to take this brush here and I'm just going to come in here, and you would say, how would you paint this lace? It's a nightmare, but you know, I kind of watched Shannon. So I'm just doing these little short tap strokes. I love watching how Shannon Squires Tays paint stuff. Okay, so I'll just wrap up here with this. Then I'll just show you one thing real quick. Or why don't you go see if that computer over there is going. I'm just going to show you this really fast. Boom, boom, boom. See, I'm going in the direction of the dress. I'm just doing this little part down in here. Okay. All right. So you just come in here and hit those areas, and then you just back off the opacity to where, so there's 100%. You see how it's done that? That looks just like smeary. So now you can back off of that to there and see how now it just looks a little bit softer. And this is before we've done any dodging and burning or anything. So back off of it just a little bit more. So I've at least got a little bit of a painterly effect on the lace, right? Richard is detailed and as just micro edit he is. He would go in, he would come in here on every one of these, and he would come down here and he would paint. He'd be doing this, you know, painting in the direction of every little thing here. And yeah, that's the way, if you really want to do it right, that's the way you would do it. So that's how he would come in and paint this dress. And that's how he would paint this entire dress. Kimberly Smith would probably decide to come in here and do it a little bit different. She'd come in here and do it at 100%. And she would come in here and repaint the entire dress. She would turn it into a new dress, doing something along these lines, you know, maybe even come down into here with it. And then she would go in, add a little texture to it, add some highlights. I hate when it does that. Add some little highlights. And I've done that before. And I'm just showing you one option that you can do. And you can see it's got a lot of lag because this is taking a lot of memory, but you could come in and totally change this dress to something different. And you remember when I showed you the texture, I would go in here and use the polygon tool, selection tool, and do that so I could paint up in here. And really now all you've got to do is dodge and burn, and you've turned that into a completely different looking dress. If you wanted to change colors of it, put a color layer over it and change colors on it. But now if you wanted to come in here, I'm going to do this in a cheat way, just really, really fast. I'm going to use a history brush to dodge and burn. This is Richard's technique on there. So I would go, come on, what are you doing? There, layers. I'm going to check my history brush. This is for a different lesson one day. Where's my history brush? And I'm going to go to multiply. And now I'll come in here, and if I'm on multiply, it'll darken. So you see how I'm darkening these here, right? So I want to make this darker. So I'm creating these ridges in this dress. And if I turn shape dynamics on, then it'll come to a point when I release, right? So now you can see I'm creating, I guess, what would you call it? Pleats, basically, in this dress. Right? If I want to, now I'll go to screen mode, and I'll bring the highlights and watch the depth that gets created. Now it's bringing that to me, right? So if I want to make that look like it's deeper, then I'll keep making that brighter and that brighter and that brighter. And it's standing out, right? So that looks like it's behind that. That's fine. I'll just keep brushing this brighter, brighter, brighter. Now look how that came towards us. That's pretty cool, right? So you can really fix a lot of things. Okay. Any questions on the mixer brush? I hope y'all.
Can you show us a method of dodge and burn, not necessarily today, but at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. And we did a little bit of dodging and burning there. There's many, many different ways to dodge and burn. What I'm going to do on the next lesson, I'm going to start bringing in a guest photographer. So what I'd love to hear from you guys posting in the Baby Dreams group, and even tag them. If there's something that you would like to learn a little nugget from another artist or another photographer, I want to start inviting different people in. And then what I'll do is kind of interview them and find out kind of what their specialty, or if somebody wanted to learn a dodge and burn technique or a little bit of a compositing technique, a simple one, then I'm going to start bringing in other voices. And because I think that's fun. We all learn from different people, right? Okay, so now I'm going to switch computers. Hopefully this will work real quick. So I'll say this, we're done with the mixer brush. So anyone that wants to check out is awesome. We're gonna, I'm just gonna give you a little bit of nugget on why you would use the mixer brush, and then how you can take that technique that you've created in Photoshop with a painting. And I kind of think that dress would look pretty cool if we go in and change that dress. I'm just sitting there looking at it. Okay, I could see we're spending another hour or so on that dress, and it might look really neat, almost kind of like a wedding dress or something. But I'm going to show you the #1 highest price item we sell after we've done a mixer brush technique to it. We take it to one more level. I'm not quite an expert at it. I'm good enough to do it to charge a bunch of money. Shannon Squire-Tays is phenomenal. Richard's phenomenal. They're the best teachers in the world at what we call embellishing. So we're done with mixer brush. Unless you have any other questions about the mixer brush, then I'm going to go over to the other computer. I don't think I can get audio where I can hear you. So Lori, y'all can type in the chat, and she can ask and hear me. So I'm going to go over to my other screen, and let me do this. I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to come over here to Magic Makers, and I'm going to make Magic Makers, which is me. I'm going to make Magic Makers the host. Okay.